Okay, let's get started, everybody. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Nicola Dufficy, and I will be your host for this evening on behalf of the League of Canadian Poets. I'm doing double duty as host and running the text, so forgive me if I'm looking at my screen and my notes and trying to let people in. We will do the best we can. I want to invite everybody. Everybody is welcome in this space. If you'd like to have your camera on to join the group of faces, you're more than welcome. If you'd prefer to have your camera off, that's also totally fine. The only thing we ask is if you can please mute your microphone so that we can hear the poets when they're speaking. That would be fabulous. I'm just going to let another person into the room here, and then we're going to get started. So everybody, tonight I am zooming in, or today in my case, I am zooming in from Waawiiyaatanong in Warwick, Queensland, Australia. So I'm on the other side of the world, and I'm also in the future because it's Friday here, and the future looks just bright and beautiful, if all of you would like to know. I'm zooming in from Waawiiyaatanong. It's the traditional land of the Gittabul people. And in my other hometown, the office of the League of Canadian Poets is situated in the land of Tikaronto, which is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse nations, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. I encourage everyone joining us today to let us know in the chat where you're tuning in from if you'd like to do so. As someone who is working in arts and culture across Canada and Australia, I acknowledge the ongoing impacts of colonialism within the arts sector in both contexts. I am committed to ongoing learning, to listening, and to building respectful, reciprocal relationships with Indigenous artists, communities, and cultural leaders. I recognize the responsibility I carry in shaping the spaces where art is created and experienced, and I actively strive to support, make space for, and amplify Indigenous-led work and perspectives. These commitments inform my creative practice, collaborations, and engagement within the arts sector. And now, without further ado, to our wonderful event. So today we are gathered for a showcase featuring 4 of the 8 Indigenous poets selected for the 2026 Poem in Your Pocket Day collection. Held during National Poetry Month, Poem in Your Pocket Day is an international movement that encourages people to centre poetry within their daily interactions. An excerpt of each poem has been designed onto a series of postcards that will be available in indie bookstores across Canada on April 23rd of this month. All of the poems are currently published on the League's website too, if you'd like to read the collection there. And when I'm finished my introduction, I'll paste a link in the chat so that you have that link that you're able to access at any point in time. So for the 2026 Poem in Your Pocket Day collection, in addition to the inclusion of some contest-winning poems, the League worked with poet and performer Michelle Poirier Brown to create a collection of work by 8 Indigenous poets. The collection is inspired by the National Poetry Month 2026 theme Land and Sea, presented in collaboration with Native women in the arts. I'd now like to welcome Michelle to the virtual stage to say a few words.
Danse, mio tagosen. Hi, Nicola, for starting us off in a good way. Gananas Compton. Michelle Poirier Brown, Nitikason, Kisikagop, Niwihuin. Kayate Manitou Wapak, Ochinia. Silk, Winanak, Equats Niwikin. I grew up in Manitoba and now live in Vernon, BC. Nikitsi Aniskotapanak ki esikasawak Poirier, Vigoreux, Curtaz, Aino, Gray, Egwa, Nipissing, Kiochiwak, Selkirk, Saint-Anne-de-Chêne, Lesser Slave Lake, Egwa Akwesasne. Dawao poets, welcome. Tawao, those online. Egwa, Tawao, Keteayak. I've logged in from the Vernon Public Library, and some of the people who participate in the Thursday evening elders gathering have come early so they could hear the Indigenous poets that will be spotlighted this evening. I'm so happy to be here and so grateful to have news that the League has decided that the 8 poems chosen for the Indigenous component of the League of Canadian Poets 2026 Poetry in Your Pocket collection was more than worthy of publication as individual pocket poems, worthy enough, in fact, to be deserving of publication as a chapbook. Nicola tells me that the chapbook is at the printers and will be ready in just a few weeks. The League will announce when it's ready to order. I look forward to gifting a copy of the chapbook to each of our elders here tonight in appreciation for their coming early to enjoy and to support these poets. I want to read my citation at the beginning of the chapbook as I wrote it to express how I feel about the poems we are going to hear. But first, a few words about the first word in the citation. The chapbook is called The Gathering. The first word of the citation is tawao, welcome. When I talked to my language mentor, Simon Bird, about using the word tawao, he reminded me that while it is the Cree word that is used to say welcome, tawao, bitikwe, welcome, come in, its true meaning is there is room. Bitikwe, tawao, come in, there is room. I appreciated Nicola's acknowledgement statement when she spoke about the ongoing responsibility she willingly takes on to amplify Indigenous voices and to make that work integral to her practice as an arts administrator. In other words, she makes room. At the League, I know that Nicola is not alone in carrying this perspective. A couple of years ago, the League made a conscious effort to make more room for Indigenous poets. Nicola is not the only person at the League I have worked with on projects to connect Indigenous poets with each other and to hold up their work. The Poem in Your Pocket Indigenous collection and the chapbook, The Gathering, are merely the most recent examples. I will read now from my citation. Tawao, welcome to this gathering. Welcome to these pages. Welcome to these poems. I have been living with these poems and others with them for several months now. I think you, too, will find them rich companions. These are intimate poems. They each take you to a specific place, vivid, scented, and full of sound. Tires scream against a blacktop in empty parking lot, a howl on a landscape disruption. A visit to the res calls to mind what your own tongue feels like when you make your way all the way back to the words you heard in childhood. Under a starlit sky, we confront the cold-hearted truth of colonialism. We sit at a laden table. Landscapes are intertwined with memories and provide the basis of our identity. Lay bare our heart, grant us release. A crow feather pierces, raven sees right through us. Collected for the League of Canadian Poets 2026 Poem in Your Pocket program, these are accomplished poems, set in quatrains, scored against white space, They'll offer lessons in both assonance and form. Among them are the acrostic, the glossa, and lineated prose. They are poems worth study, both for their craft and their call to humanity. Enjoy. Tawao.
Thank you so much for joining us, Michelle, for your work in putting this collection together and for your words of support for the poets tonight. We really appreciate it. So tonight, instead of reading the bio of each of our artists, I would like to make space for you to get to know each poet in their own words. I'll be asking each poet for a few short questions before they read to give us a window into their work and so we can listen a little more closely. Let's begin by welcoming our first poet, Elena Bentley. Welcome, Elena.
Marcy, thanks.
So, Elena, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the kind of poetry you like to write?
Sure. Elena Dishnakashan, Saskatoon, Newikin. My name is Elena, and I am from Saskatoon in Treaty 6 territory here in Saskatchewan. I am a poet primarily, and a children's author, children's book author. Second, my better plug it here. I have my second kids book just out with Gabriel Dumont Institute Press called "I Love My Auntie because aunties are everything, right?" And I'm speaking of that. I am a proud auntie. I've got a handful of beautiful nieces, Brooklyn and Lila. And I'm the editor for Grain magazine. I'm very proud to say that. And I'm Métis. My family has been in Saskatchewan or the territories and Manitoba forever. My family names are Cardinal and Smith, Pelche, Laframboise, LaFontaine, and I'm so happy to be here. Second part, right? Kind of poetry I like to write. That was the second part, right?
Yeah, I'd love to know sort of the kind of poetry you like to like, and how would you describe your voice as a poet?
Well, my voice on the page is concise. It may seem surprising because in person, I am rambly, but on the page, I write very concise. I'm kind of if you can say it with less, that's better. That always seems to move me more. I like to write, I guess, confessional. It's generally from the lyric, the I. I have been writing more historical poems lately, which is interesting, trying to find the voices of others in my family. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. I wish I had the less is more gene, but unfortunately I don't. I tend to have to edit.
That's me.
So, me too.
Talking, Elena.
So, Elena, tell us about the poem you'll be sharing with us tonight, and what was the starting point for this piece?
So this is an old poem. So I was thinking about where this came from, and I think I had been reading some other poems about food and sort of how culturally significant food can be, how important it even is in family traditions. And then at the time I had read a poem, and I have no idea who it was now, where it was all using forward slashes. And I was like, oh, I've never done that before. So let me play. And so as I was playing, it started, I was like, oh, this could be like a recipe. This kind of looks like a recipe card. So now I'm thinking food, I'm thinking recipe, and then I'm thinking of my mother. And so my mother, bless her, she tries. She feeds us. She feeds us well. She overfeeds us. But it's maybe not her strongest suit. So that's where this poem came from. And she's here tonight, so I'm not saying this behind her back. So yeah, that's where this came from.
That's wonderful. And welcome to your lovely mother watching you read tonight. So, Elena, without further ado, let's hear you read your beautiful piece.
Thank you, Marcy. Okay. In a slice of tourtière. My mother is not a cook. Though she has her staples, pork chops, lasagna, chicken mushroom casserole with corn, everything arrives with a side of yellow corn. For years, she never strayed from what she knew. She wasn't allowed to know our Métis family recipes. In the past is where my grandmother left them. At some other table, I'm sure our family ate foods with prairie flavors baked into them, laughed as the juice of some rich dish dripped down their chins, down into bellies that were sometimes hands had to forget, hands that knew the pain of forgetting. This grief makes a home inside the joints, but something in muscle memory remembers, forces hands to knead and stir and measure. Her strong hands remember joy, language, and communion. My mother learns to savor tradition, brings memory back to the kitchen. She blends together sage, salt, potatoes, flour, a little sugar, then presents me with a plate, invites me to try. With each spoonful, a new memory forms inside my belly mind. I smell birchwood fires, taste earth, swallow all our family's sorrows and smiles. So many memories inside a simple slice of moose meat pie. Marcy?
Thank you so much for sharing that beautiful piece with us. That was just lovely. So let's carry that energy into our next reader. We welcome D.A. Lockhart. Welcome, Daniel.
Newly Leita Malipog, as we say, thank you all for showing up.
Just my apologies while I fix my technology here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So for those meeting you for the first time, can you please introduce yourself for us?
My name is D.A. Lockhart. My actual name is Daniel, but D.A. is the writerly thing to do, I suppose. I currently reside in Waawiiyaatanong, which is on the shores of the Detroit River. It's a traditional name for Windsor and Detroit, Michigan. So I am a Lenape, Unami Lenape, from Moravian of the Thames First Nation, at least my family is, my father's side. My family names are Peters, Myers, Bondi, and Snake. So, and then Lockhart's a different story. We don't have time for that, so we're not going to talk about that. And I am a poet, and primarily a graduate of Indiana University Bloomington's MFA program. I've released 2 books last year. My most recent is Leaf Counter with Frontenac House out of Alberta, and the other one I would be remiss not to say is Commonwealth from the wonderful Indigenous press based in Saugeen First Nation, which is Kegadon's Press. Oh, Turtle Clan, I should say that too, right?
Thanks for that introduction. So tell us about the poem you're sharing with us today, the poem that was selected for this collection. Was there a particular moment or feeling that inspired the piece?
Okay, so today's poem is the Loose Stallions recreate fire dances in the parking lot of the abandoned Hudson Bay Company store, Waawiiyaatanong South. So it does have a couple origin points. The first one with that length of title is the American poet Hayden Carruth, whose poem titles often exceeded the length of the poems themselves. But for me, this poem comes as a recent work on a manuscript uh, entitled War Ponies. It's been funded by the Canada Council for the Arts and the Ontario Arts Council, sort of stuff that we're always supposed to say. But it is an examination of the automobile from an Indigenous standpoint, beginning at Three Forks, Montana, and moving its way all the way to southwestern Ontario, which, as you all know, is sort of home to a major automotive industry Windsor itself is a major automotive city. So the poem itself comes from two major moments. All poems for me are glimmers, the reflections of things that we've sort of encountered in our lives. And for me, it's the closing of the Hudson Bay store here in Windsor. Obviously, they closed everywhere. And these moments that you often see as you travel both the border cities, Windsor and Detroit at night, of these burnouts, people blowing donuts in the parking lots. It's very much so part of our culture, and there's a way in which it's reclaiming these areas. War Ponies also comes as a way of celebrating our powwow dances. So each section is framed by a powwow dance. And this specific one is a fire dance. No, smoke dance. This was a smoke dance. Sorry. Book's very young. I'm still trying to remember all the stuff I'm doing. So they're moving parts. But the automobiles, because they've often taken our role as folks on the land, as people walking on the land, the car becomes something else and reclaims in our name and then this sort of space abandoned by corporate colonial culture.
Thank you. That was an amazing explanation of this piece. I can't wait for people to hear it. But before you read, how did you decide on the structure or form of this poem? And how do you feel it changes when you read it aloud versus read it on the page?
Interesting question, because it is a mixture of concrete poetry and sort of what you would normally just hear poetically. So when I was constructing it, it's constructed in a different way in which I'm sort of hearing it. I hear all poetry as sort of as an emanation of sound and a replication of what sort of goes on in the world. But knowing full well that most people, we don't have huge poetry readings typically. We have smaller crowds. So I want to give a different perspective to readers. So what unfolds on the page is an experiential concrete poem, which means as you scan through the poem itself, it paints the picture of what it's talking about. The center portion, I believe that's part of the postcard, is actually a replica in words of the skeleton of the department store as it was being torn down. Now it's Sears in this case. The bay is still standing at Devonshire Mall, but Sears was torn down. We had no department stores left. So it reflects that sense of abandonment and that sort of vacancy, almost like a cyberpunk-esque kind of portrayal of that sort of what's left of, I guess, consumer culture in the heart of the city. So it plays that way, and it can unfold differently when you read it on the page, but the pauses and the breaks are usually expressed in a different way. So like light towers have a straight appearance on the page, whereas when I read it, you may not see that. So I definitely encourage everyone who's here to hear me read it to take a look at it, because there's a way in which it reflects what's being talked about in the poem, the action unfolding, if you will.
Thank you so much for that insight. I really appreciate that. As someone who worked to lay that out for our Poetry Pause newsletter, that question has been in my mind for a few weeks, and I can't wait to hear you read it out loud and see how it matches with the way that I read it in my head. So without further ado, we'd love to welcome you to read for us now. Thank you.
No pressure, right? Make sure I get it right. No, I'm just teasing.
No pressure. Just have fun. We're all friends here.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to read the title again because I think that's like half the poem. So, loose stallions recreate fire dances in the parking lot of the abandoned Hudson Bay Company store, Waawiiyaatanong South. Screams rip the cold night open like a mimiok before New Madrid jarred that big muddy river backwards. But there is no comet above, and the earth does not shake. Scaffolding eats at the skeleton of the old Sears, loose bricks, wires, dust in the spaces between, and the metal death fences are mostly border straight. Light towers above the ass end of the only mall, Stallions, as they pull burnouts beside the grit heavy shell of a shuttered Hudson Bay. Stallion after stallion, burning the world into screams, and the lights above, yellow, the blacktop beneath their drift.
Thank you so much, Daniel. What a treat to be able to hear that in your own voice. I think that's the real pleasure of this event tonight, is being able to read these poems on the postcards and on the website, but being able to hear it in your own voice just brings something that wasn't there before. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. So next up, unfortunately, we had scheduled Sarah Sands Phillips for this evening, but Sarah is no longer able to read tonight. But I would like to point you in the direction of her wonderful poem, How to Make a Crow, which is available on the League's website. I've already pasted the link in the chat, but I will repaste that for you again soon. I welcome all of you to go and read the poems of the poets who weren't able to join us for this event. You won't be disappointed. So we will move ahead then, since we don't have Sarah here with us, to our next presenter, Douglas Sinclair. Douglas, we'll just need you to unmute yourself. Yeah, I'm going to. Perfect. And I'm going to spotlight you. Okay, thanks for your patience, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. Douglas, would you mind introducing yourself and tell us about the kind of poetry that you like to write?
Okay, well, I'm Douglas Sinclair. I'm actually from Peguis First Nation in Manitoba, which is Treaty 1 territory. And it's actually interesting. I've been writing poetry all my life for quite a long time now. And it was interesting. I started writing poetry after I read Dante's Divine Comedy. This goes back, and actually that's what got me going to university to study poetry, was reading the Divine Comedy and reading all the source material for that. And then wound up going to McGill University studying literary linguistics and poetry, 20th century poetry. And so I have evolved. I think the way that I write poetry, I write structured poetry, I write unstructured poetry. I like to experiment with how you can take a thought and what's the best way to find the expression of that thought on a page, using the words and using the structure or the way that the poem evolves on the page, and what's the best way to express what it is that you're trying to capture, whether it's a visceral emotion or whether it's something more concrete. So I tend to be, I tend to write sometimes quite structured forms, like sonnets and villanelles and what have you. And other times just trying to find the right expression. And the poem I'm going to read today is sort of an example of that, because it started with a title. But maybe I should let you go ahead before I jump the gun a little bit.
Oh, that's okay. We don't mind. That definitely. Well, why don't I ask that question of you, and we can circle back. So, tell us a little bit about the poem that you're sharing with us tonight, and tell us. My question for you was: is there an image or line in this poem that came first? And you've just told us that the title came first. So,
well,
the floor is yours. Tell us about it.
You know, I've been quite familiar with the. I do a lot of reading about Indigenous history and different, I guess, colonial outcomes that have occurred over the decades, and so quite familiar with Starlight tours and what that meant in Saskatchewan, what that meant in Indigenous history. And so I guess the challenge was, how do you deal with something that is such a brutality in terms of its subject matter, with the title, with Starlight Tours, which has such a totally polar opposite view in terms of what it represents. And so to me, it was Starlight Tours I had it in my mind for quite a while, just trying to figure out what's the best way to start. And so stars was the first word that came to mind, because obviously from the tour, from that perspective, and just letting it go from there. And that's, to me, that's the beauty of writing poetry, is that it's the experimentation of starting off either with an image or with a line and seeing where it takes you. And when I started writing the first few lines of Starlight Tours, it took me sort of polar light years away from what the subject matter is, because I was trying to blend the reality, I guess, of what looking at the stars, looking at the sky, what that is like, and what a winter scene is like, and what it can be like. It can be quite a beautiful experience, snowfall and wintertime. and then marrying that kind of an image with the brutality of what Starlight Tours represents in fact. And then, and the beauty to me of poetry is that you can combine that kind of polar opposite visual experiences into a very powerful way of encapsulating a pretty powerful message about what an outcome of a colonial episode in the past is. And then also just because I read a lot of poetry, and I have all my life. So I'm quite, I guess, familiar, it's steeped in a lot of literary history in terms of what's been written in the past. And so to close off the poem with the 2 lines from Robert Frost's poem, stopping by woods on a snowy evening, it sort of marries that whole image of the brutality of that scene and closes it off with that scene from Robert Frost, which is the polar opposite extreme of what would be the kind of experience you would more likely have the experience of. So being able to, when you're formulating and writing the poem, to grab all these different nuances of expression and imagery and connotations from different other poems as well, and packaging that into a powerful, I think, powerful visual experience that people can relate to. And I think it makes a pretty damning statement about colonial impacts that I think hits harder than any other kind of like a short story or something like that. That's my view. I just think poetry is the way to encapsulate and capture those kinds of experiences in a powerful way.
Thank you so much for that explanation. This is the kind of insight that we get in having these poets join us today and being able to speak about their work a little more. I definitely feel that, you read that title, that beautiful title, Starlight Tours, and then you read on and you feel that juxtaposition of the beautiful, imagery of Starlight and then the brutality of what the poem is actually about. We're very grateful to have you join us today, and I can't wait to hear you read this poem to us in your own voice. So please go ahead and read to us Starlight Tours.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, Starlight Tours. Stars are miracles of light in the night sky, whose brilliance transcends space and time to stir up the cosmic dust of evolution and shower the heavens with the sheer audacity of creation's will to survive the cold logic of the universe. This is what we look up to, wherever we are in the world, something to wish upon or to marvel at, not to die under, in the deep freeze of a Saskatoon winter night, where the snow snuggles up to the white-tipped trees, frosty fields sleep easily in the darkness, and the distant horizon looms like a gaping mouth, swallowing the taillights of a runaway car and the lonely look of an abandoned man. The Saskatoon Police Service has launched another Starlight Tour, reserved exclusively for Indians, and not just any Indian, but those most vulnerable to the harsh bite of a prairie wind, shards of ice piercing the skin, eyes frozen shut, legs colder than the frigid air, unable to walk on a frozen road where the silence is only broken by the man's moan, whose mind shivers as much as his body quakes as he pulls a blanket of snow up to his neck. And miles to go before he sleeps. And miles to go before he sleeps. That's it. Thank you.
It's a real pleasure to have you join us and to be able to hear that poem read in your voice. There's so much to sit with in that piece, and even more so after your description of how layered this poem was in terms of the way that you thought through it and put it together and were inspired by others' work. So thank you so much, Douglas, for that powerful reading.
Thank you. I appreciated the opportunity to be able to read tonight. Thank you.
Well, we can't wait to hear more from you, so please keep writing.
Oh, absolutely.
So I'd now like to welcome our final reader for the evening. We would like to please welcome Alycia Two Bears to the stage. Alycia, I'm just going to... Sorry,
you're good. Tanase, Alycia Two Bears Nitsigasan, Agua Mistawasis ni Hayawak First Nation, Otsimia Pogo Mokinstis na Wigan Megwa, Notue Awa Heathhead, Nigawe Awa Heron Hines. I'm a mixed blooded Esqueo, who's a mother to 5. I'm a two-spirit storyteller and midwife in the making who coaxes babies down from the stars with poetry, medicine, songs. And the way that I write poetry has been described as casting spells and being enchanted by everything unknown.
Beautiful. Thank you for that introduction, Alycia. It sounds like you have a lot going on in your life and a lot of things that you're passionate about. So what draws you to poetry as a medium?
Poetry found me. I didn't think I liked poetry because you had to read about like dead old white guys in high school and everything had to rhyme in these weird ways and patterns I didn't understand. And then I met other poets as I got older, and they're like, the way that you talk and the way that you share stories, you're a poet. And it's like when another fisherman sees the one on the ocean, get that nod. I started to get the nods, and I just started to write. And then I found other artists who were like these more free forms, and I could like visually shape my poetry, particularly in triangular shapes, is my absolute favorite way to write. And I have zero training as in any types of writing or regards. It just feels like I'm spilling my blood and your blood onto the paper, and we're seeing how it dries. And that is how poetry picked me.
Thank you so much for sharing it with us. So tell us about the poem that you're going to be reading tonight, the poem that was selected for this collection. Was there a specific moment, image, or memory that anchored it?
This poem, like all pieces that I write about, is about my ex-wife. And so it's an older piece. And I remembered sharing it with her, and it was that moment of silence, like we were going hiking or something. We were in our car, and that moment of like, oh, things just shifted. This is something that, do you want this? Do I want this? Do we want this? Does this ruin everything? Moment. And that's what I remember is like the sternness of her face as she was driving in the car.
Well, that's a wonderful introduction. So please, we welcome you to read your poem for us tonight.
It's called Ashley. With her lush, full lips that offer warmth and kisses, words drenched in kindness and more than the occasional curse, reminding you of her distinctly Newfie ways. She is made from the ocean, irresistible, hypnotic life, the acclaimed salt that forever stains your lips.
Thank you, Alycia. We appreciate you sharing it with us, and especially for speaking about it, because obviously tonight all of these poems are so personal, and there's a level of vulnerability to sharing these words. So we really appreciate that you are here with us and reading for us. So what a night, everybody. What an amazing opportunity to have all of these poets in the same space. I can't wait to see your names popping up more and more, being published, reading, getting out there. Please keep writing. Please, everybody, check out the chapbook once it's published by the League. We'll send an announcement and you'll have a chance to get a copy of these poems and take them home and sit with them and add them to your bookshelves. So what an incredible evening. Thank you to all of the poets for sharing their work so generously for tonight. Thank you, Michelle, for joining us and for introducing the collection and for curating this beautiful collection for the League. Thanks to everybody who joined us for being such a thoughtful and encouraging audience. I'm seeing so many lovely emojis flying across my screen and beautiful comments in the chat. So that is really encouraging that there are so many people here to support each other. So be sure to head to your local indie bookstore to seek out one of the Poem in Your Pocket Day postcards that's going to be available on April 23rd. And then watch out for an announcement of our publication of The Gathering, our chapbook of the poems from these 4 poets and the other 4 Indigenous poets selected for the Poem in Your Pocket Day collection. Have a great evening, everybody. Good night, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you.